Hey guys, here to get into a film from 1997, The Life of Jesus. I saw this for the first time about 6 months ago, and it certainly left a timeless impact because this is just a very unique kind of bleak film that really polarizes people typically. Because the first off, the titles most certainly they kind of it can almost be a little misleading to what the content of this film is, which is portraying something of a grim lifestyle for a person. And it's kind of just showing this character who's like epileptic and he's in his 20s and he's just kind of suffering from these kind of ambiguous sort of things, but he's kind of like, he's a guy who just kind of lives his life in a very simple kind of way. Like he has a relationship with his mother, has a girlfriend he has a lot of sex with, and then a lot of his friends who are also kind of just, you could tell everyone feels a little dead inside and the world seems kind of dead around them. And the kid ultimately just seems very like he's very unfulfilled. So um, yeah, like I think what the title is saying is that, like, Jesus' name is in this title because I believe that he's trying. The title means that Christ himself is a divine force, while none of these characters are necessarily. And it's in a lot of ways maybe just showing the downfall in spirit of how a person throughout nihilism and just like miscellaneous situations that are realistic given the heat of the moment. Like like it makes sense that a person would almost want to abandon kind of this relationship. So it's like I think looking at Jesus Christ as a superior figure is most certainly a fascinating thing in a lot of ways because this just kind of shows again like just something of a dead end lifestyle, and I think that's the opposite of what Jesus wants out of a person, a dead end. Especially if you're a lonely type. But this kid, in this case, not even lonely. Like he's just kind of got too much going on around him. Like having all this like it's like him and his girlfriend typically have very aggressive sex. You can tell that they're just kind of in it to get away from something and not actually go out and really pursue like a meaningful kind of relationship. And that's why I remain a virgin. Because it should be meaningful, I think. And I think if it's not meaningful, I kind of recognize, I think a lot of my intimidation of a lot of sex is the contrast of that mood, which is, I believe, violence. I've never really wanted to look too deeply at envy and violence in myself, but knowing that I'm capable is enough to realize I don't want to spend enough time focusing on it. I would literally just rather turn to God whenever I feel those kind of moods slightly come to me, because He knows how to handle it, and I know it's very. But in this film, also kind of just shows something very graphic. Um, as far as just like a very empty kind of character, I really love the character. David Duche's performance is perfect as Freddy because you can tell he's just very empty inside. And a lot of these long takes, like there's definitely a lot of nothingness kind of going on here, a lot of nihilism because this kicks in. Another guy starts to hit on his girlfriend, and this makes him violent. Those are the kind of feelings I realistically kind of fear. It's like a beast in a man of envy because someone else wants to possess what he has in a moment. And it kind of gets to a point where like he just kind of seems like he's nihilistic to the idea of sexual assault in general. So it gets to a point of just violence. But the cinematography here, yeah, it's set in France, so there's definitely a very interesting portrayal of France. Again, it reminds me of like a Robert Bresson kind of vision on it, where there's just something very bleak around it. Um, and this is just basically about a man who just it's a descent into being completely soulless. A lot of nihilism kind of just makes this clear that with a very quiet kind of tone, how a person can just fall into that. They could be often by way of your peers, like the people you surround yourself with. This is like a kid in his early 20s, and it's like I think when everyone's feeling kind of dead inside, it's like you just are bored. You're going to reach for little things that are just ultimately not going to really be the best for you in a lot of ways for to benefit your actual state. Um, and in this case, it's kind of just taking in a lot of those details, really, just the details of just carefree guys who don't really have much opportunities for themselves. They don't really have too much of a future for themselves. So again, and I think what that causes, young men to do is just kind of act like apes in a moment, and it's like, of course, that could turn into violence and tragedy if you're not careful. Um, but yeah, and a lot of this is also just there's certainly quite a bit of Jesus Christ symbolism looming around this film too. A lot of biblical imagery, like the resurrection of Lazarus, is portrayed on the walls throughout. Um, Interesting characters going on here, but and it's almost like basically it's about bored kids who would be very, very depressed. They just didn't have these quick outlets. It's almost like, because you see characters like Freddy, like he doesn't really know how to get out of this kind of dull existence. Like you can even tell during like the sex, he's just very unfulfilled. He's not happy, but he can't figure out what's missing in his life. Like it's like he can't find it. And then his mother, she always supports him and she always cares about him, but there's nothing she can do to help him. So it's just this is kind of like a small town kind of thing. And yeah, but ultimately it's almost just like Freddy's character, the main character of all this, and it feels like it's set almost entirely outside. I really love that. It feels like the emphasis is particularly just placed on a lot of nature landscapes, but without overdoing it. I certainly realize some films are just perfect at naturally capturing this organic nature kind of landscape. This is just one of those. And just kind of looking at how characters act in their nature of their environment. A lot of close-ups going on too. Like you're just kind of taking in a lot of very detailed eye movements and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, like you have like, yeah, it's just a very strong piece of humanity, I would say. And it feels like, again, with the title, it's almost like the director just wants to look at people who, it's like almost like as a viewer, it's almost like coming from a place of, and maybe that's what it takes to love this movie, just kind of like seeing the miracle of Jesus's resurrection, Lazarus, and basically the way that this kind of contrasts with just a mopey kid, basically, who through these miscellaneous situations, and it makes sense as it unfolds here. He basically just kind of has this complete downfall in spirit to the point where he's a soulless person. A lot of just very disconnected in general. A lot of rage kind of building up. Again, jealousy. That's like the scariest thing to me. I think envy is about the most terrifying mood. And it's like when I recognize that again, it's like instinctually I just want to turn to God. But everyone's going to handle this differently. Some people will just live in it and act in it. I can't fathom that right there. That's so extra, because I literally see, logically, those moods lead to violence in a man. And why would you want, and I get it. I like to embrace bad moods a lot, but envy is not one I want to base too much, because I could be envious if I sat down and actually looked at all the reasons, but I don't want to, because I don't need to. I'm already, if I have my place in Nirvana and fulfillment, I'm going to go straight there when those moods kick in, not for a place of superiority, but for necessity. So I can be a stable person, not violent ape whatsoever. Because that's the last thing I ever want to become. So I was like, let's make that clear. As that's common sense. It's not like the film taught me that. The film certainly gives a reason why. But you kind of just see your own. I think this is like my favorite take on, like, I think Robert Bresson was going for this kind of thing with some of his films, like Sir Boss Hard, but I think this is my favorite. Telling this kind of story. Maybe it's trying to tell a story that maybe it could bring a revelation to a kid of why it could be beneficial to have a God figure in his life. And I think sometimes you have to go through those kind of things in order to get there. Maybe perhaps that's ambiguously where this kind of goes, because when you become soulless, it's like you just have to turn into a greater force. You just have to. Otherwise, life would be, it seems to me, suicidally depressing. So, it's like, you just can't, there's no way I can imagine. But, I mean, yeah, this is kind of just a kid growing up ultimately in the face, of a holy world where a kid isn't holy at all whatsoever. Yeah, but it's almost just like, it's a very, very profound kind of experience. It certainly looks at a person's actions, and it certainly does, because of the title and a lot of the symbolic allusions, it does organically make me think a lot of Jesus Christ and the pain that he endured, the suffering he endured. Because that's the thing. I think when you have a story like this, it's like, and I think when you feel this way, it's like, I think what makes a relationship with Jesus essential is, okay, he suffers that much, like he suffered even more, and he actually was okay with it. And that itself is, and of course, Jesus is like a superior figure. So it's not exactly like you can do it too, but just know that like your torment could be worse. Basically, I mean, it seems like, contrast to what's going on in the story. And it's like, but if you don't know that, it makes you act violent. It makes you act crazy because you feel like you're just by far on an inferior moment in the heat of a moment. And that will make you act a certain way. So if you turn to something of a greater force, you would know logically not to do that, because intuitively that will feel horrible a little later. That will completely corrupt your spirit. Instead, you can refine that, tame that, then ultimately you will feel wonderful having tamed it, because you recognize that, like, just don't let violent moods get to the best of you. Don't let those, like, feelings of jealousy. Those are intimidating. But yeah, I thought this was a very powerful film. This is probably one I'll just come back to every few years, but it's very powerful because it is a pretty personal kind of story. I mean, the kid's just in his 20s, and it's pretty clear that there's nothing really going on. So it's like he's just kind of making stuff up around him. But then sometimes forces just come around and just can make you angry. It can make you feel frustrated. Whatever way that might be, and it can make you act crazy. And literally become violent. And just the fact that I can watch this and actually relate a little bit to that scares me. So yeah, I can't rewatch this all the time. But it's quite a crushingly haunting film that lives in my soul, certainly most internally. Really, really glad I discovered this film. This is the first, yeah. Really, really glad I saw this. So it comes highly recommended. I don't even know if I'd recommend this to just anybody. This is a bit of an interesting kind of one. And I don't think, if you don't really believe in God, Jesus, I don't think that would necessarily make a difference in this film. It's just, if you can tolerate some symbolism and whatnot, it's the story itself is just a lot. This is a lot more of this is a very down to earth, just like tragedy. If you just like, I think I recommend those people the people who like a pure tragedy. It's pretty humorless, but it's just a tragedy kind of unfolding. If you're compelled by the nature of tragedy, then yeah, I do recommend this film to you. I think that's the basis right there. So, if you love tragedy, highly recommend it.